Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
Thank you again for a little bit of your time on this edition of Around with Randall. I had an interesting conversation recently with a client. Names aren't that important. And it was actually not about major gifts, principal gifts, or planned gifts. It was someone who is growing in their profession and doing a really nice job and talking about more of the annual giving corporate support. We were talking about how that was going to be her avenue of opportunity regarding the event that's coming up in the near future. And I started asking some questions about who she was going to talk with, how she was going to do this. And what finally came out of it was a conversation about an email that she was intending to send, asking people for their gifts in support of this event. And I stopped and thought, I need to write this down because this is a podcast subject. We've become too familiar, too comfortable, too ritualistic in our ability to ask people via third-party means. I mean, indirectly, not in person. And on top of that, not individualize the solicitations that we're going to make. So let's talk about this challenge today. Because people are, and I think you've probably experienced this if you have any engagement in philanthropy, are less likely to pick up the phone. They don't respond quite as much by email. People are a little more, put up a few more hurdles just because of their own privacy and their own lives. And they're busy. And that's caused us to, in terms of us being philanthropic leaders, philanthropy enthusiasts, fundraisers, to not individualize and create in-person opportunities for our asks. And this applies to annual giving, corporate giving, foundation giving. Now, in foundation, corporate giving, if there is a defined process where they don't want to see you and you have to follow certain steps, that is an application process. That's not what I'm talking about. But annual funds, principal gifts, planned gifts, even into major gifts. Interestingly enough, and I thought about this after the fact, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a planned giving expert, somebody I have a great deal of respect for. And he is new to his organization. He's kind of leading the planned giving conversation for all of them. And his comment was, we have so many gift officers that think that by sending out an every other month brochure or communication about planned giving, that's going to bring the planned gift, which kind of led me back into, as I thought about it, the conversation I was having with this corporation annual fund special events person. I want to turn this around for a second, and I want you to think about your choice of giving. Whatever you choose to do, whether it's buying Girl Scout cookies or making a philanthropic gift or buying something, are you more or less likely to purchase something if it's done with respect individually and in terms of interaction? It's individualized. The answer is, of course, you're more likely to engage. And that's how we have to look at our donors. So let's start with the basics. And what we're going to do today is kind of break this down into what should you be doing to individualize asks and do so in person. And in person, I'll get to kind of as an air quote, there are different ways of doing it. But it's not done third party, IV or IE or EG email or just voicemail. Hey, I don't ever have a conversation. The first part is that we have to ask. Someday I'm going to write a book and I'm going to call it Doggone It. Yes, you have to go see people and ask them for money to raise money. Because I think sometimes we live in a world where we think it just comes naturally. And there are plenty of examples that you can name, that I can name, that we could name, where a gift came in without a lot of work. Those are great. They're special. They're wonderful. But at the end of the day, that's not what's normal. What drives giving is when we actually build long-term relationships and ask people to join us in what we're trying to accomplish. And along the way, which is maybe the most important piece of the difference that I'm talking more and more about. Ask them what's passionate to them, and then find a way to slide it into what we're trying to do. But all of this comes back to eventually we've got to ask them for money. I have been privy to, seen, witnessed, can't tell you how many times there is a conversation that led right up to the ask. And then somehow the meeting ended and we never asked for anything. And the donor, looking at their eyes and kind of judging their body language, is just as confused as I am about what actually just happened. And the gift officer, when we got out, well, this happened a number of times over 10, 15 years. I say, wait, did you not see that? They were ready to be asked. Oh, they were? Yeah. Now what do we do? Well, that's a really good question. We have to set this up. And so a couple episodes I did the soft ask. So go back and review that, the value of the soft ask and how you set that up. But the soft ask isn't the actual ask. That's to get you closer to yes and to know exactly what you should be asking for. There are pros, positives, outcomes from asking in person. And this is where I had that air quotes in person. If you're asking for $1,500 in a great gift in support of a sponsorship, you do not need to go see them 5 times, particularly if they've given in the past. You probably can do it with a phone call or 2. So in person doesn't necessarily mean face-to-face, depending on the size of the gift and how often they're used to giving it. With that said, if you have a choice between driving down the road and seeing someone and saying, last year you gave us $1,500 to sponsor this event. We'd love to come and chat with you about what this is again this year and ask you to support that again, and go see them and say, would you think about this? That's a better option than the phone call. But I also realize that if there are a lot of donors at $1,500 and that's your job, you may not be able to do that. So a phone call can be considered to me in person, not a voicemail, not an email. And by the way, that's what this situation, what started all of this, was planning on doing. I'm going to send out a mass email. Like, that's called marketing. That's not called philanthropy or fundraising. Even if you give them a hyperlink to sign up, hey, would you sponsor this $1,500? Respect them enough to actually ask them. So what are the pros, the positives, the outcomes that come from an in-person and personal conversation? And when we get into major gifts, principal gifts, and planned gifts, we'll get a little bit more detailed about what's personal. Number one is that we know when we do it face-to-face that gifts are larger. They just simply are. We can ask for more money, more support. People appreciate having someone sit down and respect them enough to ask them for their support. Number two is participation rates, engagement, actual gifts coming to fruition are much higher when we do it in person. It's actually, according to a couple studies, almost double the amount that we would get when we do it in person. And by the way, if you're in person, you're personalizing it. You're having a conversation face to face. Number three is that gift decisions are much shorter. It doesn't take as long for the donor to make a decision because you're sitting in front of them. You can answer their questions. You can get over the hurdles without going back and forth. Private conversations, number four, foster greater trust. You actually are investing your most valuable 2 assets, your time and yourself, to build a relationship with someone. That engenders trust. That stronger relationship builds into and morphs into more personal connection. It's sustainable. So if we know that there's more money, larger gifts, we know that more people are going to say yes if we're in person. We know that we can get through the challenges and issues if we're in person, individualizing the conversation. And finally, we can know that we're building a deeper, more meaningful relationship for future gifts. Why is this so hard? And we're back to what we talked about an episode or two ago around water off a duck's back, because most gift officers are afraid of being told no. And what I find is that most of the time, the no has nothing to do with you. It's something else going on with them. So we have to get in front of people. Now, that all sounds like that's a lot of annual giving, phone calls, 2,500, maybe up to $5,000 gifts. This pertains to the individualization of gifts that we should be doing as a major gift, principal gift, and plan giving levels. That all starts with the conversations we have at the beginning about changing how we qualify people, finding out what their passion is. If you start with, in the qualification stage, what is their passion? What do they give to? What do they think about the things we're trying to do? Give them an opportunity. Ask somebody for money, you get advice. Ask them for advice, you get money. If you do that, you begin an individualization process built into your ask, because you find out their passion is X and they want to accomplish Y. And thus A, B, and C will do that. That is the essence of individualization. So how we start the relationship process actually can lead us to an individualized in-person approach. What does a major gift, principal gift, plan gift solicitation at its individualized personal level sound like? Well, it starts with the thought process of, what are you actually asking for? I've been too often brought into conversations too late where the gift officer says, well, I've already asked them for $10,000, $25,000. And I ask the question, did you come up with that number or did they come up with that number? And not only don't they tell me that someone else came up with the number, they can't even tell me who came up with the number. Normally, when I hear that hard number, particularly on a round number, 25, 50, 10, 100, 250, it was us setting the benchmark. What we should be doing is worrying about outcome and passion. If you want to see this program, if you believe in this program that can change this many lives, to do the kind of work that we've discussed as we have built the conversation, it would take somewhere around $250,000. Is that something we could talk about? That's a much different conversation, because I've created, as an example, a threshold to get to the goal of what they have the passion about. And I know that to fund that, it's going to be an X amount of dollars. The other thing is if 250,000 in our example is too much, I haven't asked them for 250. I have a retreat point. Well, I wasn't asking you for the 250 because I know that we've talked about it. What I'd like you to do is, would you consider being a $100,000 donor for this passion you have that we can accomplish? And I will try to go out and use your gift as a match, as an incentive, as leverage on 3 other gifts of 50,000. What you get is options if you just don't say, well, we do $25,000. Number 2, by individualizing it to their passion, you can elevate the gift, meaning the dollar figure. So if you're able to do this verbally, somebody in accounting, finance, or auditing, or in the foundation, tracking, CRM infrastructure team is going to want some documentation. What does that look like? Well, we have 2 choices. We can create a proposal, which should be fairly simple, but also individualized. It uses the name of the person, the organization, or the couple multiple times throughout about how it enters into the conversation. A letter that says, Dear Randall and Mary Lynn, I can't thank you enough for the time we've spent together and talking about A, B, and C. As discussed, I've attached some documentation for you to review that will support what we've discussed, M, N, O, and P. That is specific to them. The proposal is specific to their passion. That's how you individualize. which means there is some work in proposals and subsequently gift agreements. The more you individualize this written proposal, knowing who should be the signatory, maybe it's the CEO because they value that person's opinion and they're not even making the ask. CEO signs the letter. Thank you for spending time with Bob, the gift officer. I know he's told me so much about how you want to make a difference in this, this, and this. That individualization is critical. You want that donor to believe, because it should be true and genuine, that this is the only thing you're doing all day. This is the most important thing you're doing professionally. And to show that level of engagement, you have to individualize it. And it's not a mail merge. Yes, you can individualize a letter by mail merging, and it has its place, but not in principal gift, planned gift, and major gift solicitations. And I would argue not in annual giving either when it's an individual ask. If you're doing mass letters for $20, that's a different conversation. The other thing is realizing who has the influence really to move that gift to fruition. Should someone else be a signatory on an individual letter along with the gift officer? Is there a doctor who should be involved? A professor, someone who has helped that individual realize the importance of their gift? And remember, you might be putting something on paper, but we're going to hand deliver it. We're going to look across the table and say, here's the proposal, particularly the higher level dollar figures. And by the way, you might think, well, of course, this is the way it should be. Randall, why are you doing this? Because I've had a couple of examples at the end of the year where I was like, no. Yes, I know it's the 30th. Yes, I know you have to go see them. They're calling you. Yes, I know you were planning to take some time off, but it's the end of the year. You got to go. The other thing that can happen when you do it individually and face-to-face is those objections. Well, I've been thinking about it, and I have this question. Great, let's answer it right now. If you're trying to do this via email or do this third party, i.e. not an individual conversation, you don't have a chance to react to the objections in the moment. Your ability to overcome challenges and objections, which we've done podcasts on, is critical. I just assumed when we did those podcasts, we'd be doing it in person or on the phone or something individualized. What I've realized is I can't overlook that step when I talk and teach about best practices in building relationships and driving revenue in the door philanthropically. All of this is to say is this takes time, planning, which goes back to things I talk about controlling your calendar, being able to know when you're available, and making yourself available enough that it's convenient for the people you're going to see. I know there are people listening that will say this is all elemental. It should be, but I'm finding more and more that we have a lot of wonderfully dedicated people who are graduating out of these philanthropy schools where they're certainly talking about philanthropy as a profession, but this is best practice. And I think we're missing some of these pieces. This is where mentoring's important, where teaching's important, where education's important, and not just formal education, but the education you do on your own. Like, thank you for listening to this podcast. That's why I do it. All of this is to say, individualizing and personalizing the communication and the proposal and the ask are essential if you want to maximize giving. And sending it via email and just hoping for the best is not going to be your best friend. It same applies in sales, same applies in relationships, same applies in philanthropy. Individualize. Do it personally. What you'll find is greater results, greater success every day. Don't forget to check out the blogs at Hallett Philanthropy, posting 2 a week, Tuesday, Thursday or so. You can get an RSS feed right to your inbox. And if you'd like to, you can reach out to me at podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. There's a lot of moving pieces in our communities, a lot of upheaval. Philanthropy has the magic elixir to be able to help solve things that the government, and individuals can't. It's the collection of people's desires to make their community a better place. And what we know is when we do that, we get to my favorite saying. Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. Philanthropy is the ability to do that, to make things happen for those who are wondering what happened. And if you individualize your relationships, realizing that everybody's a little bit different, what a person who wants the community to be better is going to be different than someone who wants a family heritage or tradition to continue. Individualizing those opportunities makes philanthropy what it should be. Changing lives, making a difference, helping those people and things that are most valuable to us. Can't wait to see you the next time right back here on another edition of Around with Randall. And don't forget, make it a great day.